John was a man who loved quiet and peace. For many years, he had worked as a U.S. Marshal. His job was not easy. He had faced danger and helped people many times. But now, John was retired. He wanted to live a calm life in a small neighborhood, far from the noise and rush of the city. John's house was simple but nice. It had a small garden in front and a wooden fence around the yard. He liked to sit outside in the mornings, drinking coffee and watching the birds. His neighbors were mostly friendly people, and life seemed peaceful. But not everyone liked John's way of doing things. Next door lived a woman named Karen. Karen was very strict about rules. She was part of the Homeowners Association, or HOA, which was a group that made rules about how houses and yards should look in the neighborhood. Karen believed these rules were very important. She liked everything to be perfect and in order. One day, John decided to fix his old fence. The fence was broken in some places, and he wanted to make it stronger. He went to the store, bought new wood, and worked on it carefully. After a few days, the fence looked much better. John was happy because now his yard was safe and neat. But Karen was not happy at all. Karen came to John's door with a serious look on her face. "John," she said sharply, "your new fence is too high. It breaks the HOA rules. You need to fix it right away." John was surprised. "Karen, I checked the rules before building it. This fence is just right. It's not too tall." Karen shook her head. "No, it is. I will report you to the HOA. You have to remove the fence or lower it." John felt uneasy. He did not want any trouble. He said politely, "Let's talk to the HOA board together. We can ask them about the fence." But Karen did not want to talk. She was angry and decided to take action quickly. A few days later, John was sitting in his living room when he heard a knock on the door. When he opened it, two men stood there. They were not in police uniforms, but they wore plain clothes and had badges around their necks. John could not understand why they were here. "We are HOA officers," one of the men said. "You are under arrest for breaking HOA rules." John blinked in surprise. "Arrest? There is no such thing as HOA police. This is not the law." The man smiled in a way that did not feel right. "We have the right to take you in if you don't fix your fence." John's heart beat faster. Something about these men was wrong. He asked them to show their identification. The men hesitated. One of them fumbled with a wallet and pulled out a badge that looked fake. John stayed calm but serious. "I am a U.S. Marshal," he said, showing his real badge from his pocket. "You are not police officers. You are pretending." The two men's faces changed. They looked nervous and angry. They quickly left the house without saying a word. John closed the door and sat down, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. Who sent these men? Why did they want to scare him? Later, John talked to some neighbors. They told him that Karen had complained to the HOA many times before. Some people said she liked to control others and used the rules to make life difficult. John knew he had to be careful. He had seen many bad things in his job, but this was different. This was personal. Karen was trying to use fake power to push him around. John decided to keep calm. He would not fight with anger. Instead, he would find the truth and stand for what was right. He thought about calling the real police if needed. That night, John sat on his porch and looked at his fence under the moonlight. It was strong, just like him. He whispered quietly to himself, "No one can scare me with lies." The next morning, John started writing a letter to the HOA board, explaining everything. He wanted the community to know the truth. He hoped that peace would come back to his neighborhood soon. But deep inside, John knew this was just the beginning of a bigger problem. The morning after John sent his letter to the HOA board, the neighborhood felt calm again. John hoped the problem with Karen and her fake officers would stop. But he was wrong. Sometimes, trouble has a way of finding you when you least expect it. John was working in his garden, planting some flowers near the new fence. The sun was warm, and birds sang softly. He enjoyed these peaceful moments. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a car stopping nearby. When he looked up, he saw two men walking toward his house. These men were different from the last time. They wore plain clothes, but they looked serious and carried something in their hands. John felt a little uneasy but stayed calm. He knew from his years as a U.S. Marshal that it was important not to panic. When the men reached the porch, John opened the door slowly. One man spoke first, his voice firm but polite. "Mr. John, we need to talk to you about the fence." John looked at the men carefully. "Who are you?" he asked. "And why are you here again?" The other man showed a badge hanging on a chain around his neck. But John could tell it was not a real police badge. It looked cheap and fake. "We are from the HOA enforcement team," the first man said. "You are violating the rules, and we have orders to bring you in." John raised his eyebrows. "Bring me in? What do you mean? HOA cannot arrest people. It is not the law." The men didn't answer. Instead, the first man stepped forward and said, "You must come with us now. If you refuse, we will take other steps." John's heart beat faster. He had seen many dangerous situations in his life, but this was strange. Two men pretending to be police and trying to take him away. It felt like something out of a bad movie. John kept his voice calm but strong. "I am a U.S. Marshal. Here is my badge." He took the real badge from his pocket and held it up for the men to see. The men's faces changed instantly. The second man swallowed hard, and the first man's smile disappeared. They looked nervous and unsure. "You don't want to cause trouble," the first man said quickly. "Maybe we should leave." John didn't move. "Who sent you? Who gave you permission to do this?" The men looked at each other, then without another word, they turned and walked away down the street. John closed the door and leaned against it, feeling a mix of relief and worry. He knew this was not over. Karen was behind all of this. She wanted to scare him, but she didn't know who he really was. Later that day, John went to the local police station. He told the officers everything about Karen, the fake HOA officers, and how they tried to take him away. The police took his story seriously and promised to look into it. At home, John sat in his living room thinking. He wanted to protect his peace and his rights, but he didn't want the neighborhood to become a battlefield. He remembered the many years he spent serving and the friends he lost along the way. Now, he wanted to find a way to solve this problem without more fighting. Meanwhile, across the street, Karen sat in her kitchen, fuming. She did not like that John was strong and calm. She thought her plan to send fake officers would scare him into giving up the fence. But it didn't work. Karen whispered to herself, "I need to find another way. He won't listen to me, but maybe I can make others in the neighborhood turn against him." Back at John's house, his neighbor Lily came to visit. Lily was a young mother with 2 children. She had noticed how Karen often acted bossy and made things hard for other neighbors. Lily wanted to support John. I'm sorry you are going through this, John, Lily said kindly. Karen has always been difficult. But you are brave. You stood up to those fake officers. John smiled. Thank you, Lily. It means a lot to have your support. They talked for a while about the neighborhood and how it could be a better place if people were kinder to each other. That evening, John sat on his porch, watching the sunset. He knew the fight was not just about offense. It was about respect, truth, and standing up for what is right. He hoped the neighborhood would find peace soon, but he was ready if more challenges came. As the stars appeared in the sky, John felt calm again. He whispered, "No one can scare me with lies. I will protect my home." The next morning, John woke up feeling a mix of determination and concern. The strange visit from the fake HOA officers had shaken the neighborhood more than he expected. He knew this was no ordinary dispute over a fence. Something bigger was happening, and he had to be ready. John made a plan. He wanted to find out who exactly was behind the fake officers and why they were trying to scare him. He also wanted to protect the other neighbors from any trouble. Years of experience as a U.S. Marshal taught him the value of patience and careful investigation. Around mid-morning, John decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. He wanted to see how people felt and if anyone had noticed anything unusual. As he walked, some neighbors greeted him warmly, but others looked worried or avoided his eyes. John knew that fear and gossip could change people's minds quickly. When John reached the corner store, he saw Lily talking to a few neighbors. She smiled and waved at him. John joined the group, and Lily quietly said, "Some people think you caused trouble, John. Karen is telling stories about you." John frowned. "Stories? What kind of stories?" Lily lowered her voice. "She says you are breaking the rules on purpose, that you don't care about the neighborhood." John sighed. "That is not true. I only want to live here in peace." The neighbors nodded, but John felt the weight of the rumors. He knew Karen's words were powerful in the small community. Later that day, John received a phone call. It was from a neighbor who wanted to stay anonymous. "John," the voice said quietly, "I saw Karen talking to some men last week. They looked like the fake officers. I think she hired them." John thanked the neighbor and wrote down the information. This was the first clear proof he had. That evening, John sat at his kitchen table, reviewing his notes. He felt a strange mixture of anger and sadness. He didn't want to believe that someone he saw every day would go so far to cause trouble. But he knew the truth could not be ignored. John picked up his phone and called the HOA office. He asked to speak with the board members directly. After explaining everything, they promised to investigate. They seemed surprised to hear about the fake officers and said such actions were against HOA rules and possibly illegal. The next day, John received a letter from the HOA board. They apologized for the misunderstanding and said they were taking the matter seriously. They asked John to meet with them to discuss how to improve things in the neighborhood. John felt a small relief. The official HOA was not like Karen. They wanted to help. Meanwhile, Karen was angry and frustrated. She did not expect John to fight back so strongly. She wanted to protect her power and control over the neighborhood. To her, rules were a way to keep others in line. Karen decided to confront John directly. One afternoon, she knocked on his door. John opened it and saw her standing there, eyes sharp and voice cold. "John," Karen said, "you think you are better than us because you were a U.S. Marshal. But here, you have to follow the rules like everyone else." John looked at her calmly. "Karen, I respect rules. But I also believe in fairness. That is what I am asking for. Karen scoffed. Fairness? You don't know what that means. John replied, maybe I do. I've spent my life helping people and protecting the truth. I want this neighborhood to be a safe place for all of us. Karen paused, then said, we will see about that. John closed the door gently but firmly. He knew this would not be the last time they spoke. That night, John thought about the meaning of peace and justice. He remembered his years of service, the good and the bad. He realized that even in retirement, his duty was not over. Sometimes, the fight for right and respect begins in small places, like a neighborhood. He sat quietly, feeling ready for what was next. Days passed since Karen's cold visit to John's house. The neighborhood was still buzzing with whispers. Some neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and others watched John and Karen with curious eyes. The small conflict was no longer just about a fence, it had become something bigger, a clash between respect and power. John continued his daily routine. Every morning, he sat by the fence, drinking his coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. His fence stood strong and neat. It was not just wood and nails, it was a symbol of his hard work and his right to live peacefully. One afternoon, while John was trimming the bushes near the fence, he saw a small crowd gathering across the street. People were pointing and talking loudly. John's heart beat faster. He wondered what was happening. He walked slowly toward the crowd, curious but cautious. When he got closer, he saw Karen standing in the middle, speaking loudly. Her face was red, and her voice was sharp. This fence is against the rules. We must all follow the rules to keep our neighborhood nice. John should fix his fence now, or we will take stronger action. The crowd looked mixed. Some people nodded and agreed, while others seemed unsure. John knew that Karen was trying to use the crowd to pressure him. But he was not afraid. John stepped forward and raised his hand to get everyone's attention. Friends, neighbors, he said calmly, I want to speak with you all. The crowd quieted down, eyes fixed on him. John continued, this fence is not about breaking rules. I checked the rules carefully before building it. The fence is safe and fits the neighborhood. But more than that, this is about respect and fairness. Karen rolled her eyes but stayed quiet for the moment. John looked around the crowd. Some of you may have heard stories that are not true. Stories that try to make me look bad. But I promise you, I only want to live here peacefully, like all of you. A woman in the crowd, Mrs. Thomas, raised her hand. John, I have lived here for 10 years. I have seen Karen control too much. Sometimes, she forgets that we are all neighbors, not enemies. Another neighbor, Mr. Lee, nodded. It's true. Rules are important, but so is kindness. We cannot let fear and anger control us. John smiled at the support. Thank you. I believe that if we listen to each other, we can solve our problems. Fighting will only make things worse. Karen stepped forward again, her voice louder. John, you are being selfish. The rules are clear. If you don't fix the fence, you will face consequences. John looked at Karen and said firmly, I respect the rules, Karen. But I will not let false threats and lies control me. There was a moment of silence. Then, a young woman named Lily stepped forward. She was one of the neighbors who had quietly watched the conflict unfold. Karen, Lily said softly but clearly, we all want a happy neighborhood. But we cannot build that on fear. I know John has done nothing wrong. Maybe it's time we all try to be kinder. Karen's face softened for a moment, but then she shook her head. You don't understand. John spoke again. Karen, we all want peace here. If you have concerns, we can talk about them. But we must respect each other. The crowd began to disperse slowly. Some neighbors talked quietly among themselves, thinking about what John and Lily had said. After the crowd left, John looked at his fence. It stood firm, shining in the afternoon sun. It was more than wood now. It was a symbol of courage and hope. That evening, John sat on his porch, feeling tired but hopeful. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. Karen was still angry, and some neighbors were still unsure. But for the first time, John saw a chance for real change. He whispered to himself, respect and truth will win. This neighborhood can be a home for all of us. After the confrontation at the fence, the neighborhood seemed quieter, but the tension had not completely disappeared. John still felt the weight of the eyes watching him every day. He knew Karen was still unhappy, but something had changed. More neighbors were beginning to question her harsh ways. One morning, as John watered the plants in his garden, Lily came over with her 2 young children. Her face was kind and hopeful. Good morning, John, she said softly. I wanted to talk with you. John smiled. Good morning, Lily. What's on your mind? Lily sat down on the porch step. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. Karen has been difficult for many of us for a long time. She likes to control everything, and it's hard to live with that. John nodded. I've seen that too. But I don't want to make enemies. I want us all to be friends. Lily looked down for a moment. You know, Karen has made life very hard for me sometimes. I'm a single mother, and she has complained about my children playing outside, even when they are quiet. It made me feel like I didn't belong here. John listened carefully. That's not fair, Lily. Every family should feel safe and welcome. Lily smiled a little. That's why I want to help you, John. You stood up to her, and I think many of us want to support you, but we were afraid. John looked at her with respect. Thank you, Lily. It means a lot to know I'm not alone. Over the next few days, Lily quietly spoke to other neighbors. Slowly, people began to share their own stories. They talked about the small ways Karen had made life difficult for them: strict rules, constant complaints, and harsh words. One afternoon, a group of neighbors gathered at Lily's house. John was there too. They talked openly about the problems and how they wanted to make the neighborhood better. Mr. Lee, an older man who lived 2 houses down, said, "We all want to live peacefully. Maybe it's time to remind Karen that we are a community, not a place for control and fear." Mrs. Thomas agreed. John has shown us that kindness and courage can make a difference. We should stand together. John felt a warm feeling inside. After years of facing danger in his job, he now faced a different kind of challenge: winning the hearts of a neighborhood. Meanwhile, Karen was watching all this from her window. She saw the neighbors talking and smiling with John. Her anger grew stronger. She didn't like losing control. One afternoon, Karen came to John's door again. This time, her voice was quieter but still firm. "John, I want to talk. Maybe we can find a way to solve this," she said. John was surprised but nodded. "I'm willing to listen, Karen." They sat down in John's living room. Karen took a deep breath. "I'm just worried about the neighborhood. I want it to look nice and safe. John smiled gently. I understand, Karen. I want the same thing. But rules are for everyone, and kindness is important too. Karen looked away for a moment. Maybe I was too strict. I just want what's best. John nodded. We all want that. Maybe we can work together, not against each other. Karen didn't say much, but John saw a small change in her eyes. That evening, John felt hopeful. He knew it would take time, but maybe the neighborhood could heal. As the sun set, John looked at his fence again. It wasn't just wood, it was a sign of courage, friendship, and a fresh start. Days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood slowly began to change. John's courage and kindness had inspired many neighbors to speak up. The atmosphere was lighter now, and the tension that once filled the air was starting to fade. John continued his routine, but now he noticed more friendly smiles and greetings as he walked down the street. Even Karen, though still serious, was quieter and less aggressive. Something was different. One bright morning, John received a letter from the HOA board. The letter said they had finished their investigation about the fake officers and Karen's complaints. They explained that sending fake officers was wrong and against the law. They also said they would support John and protect his rights as a homeowner. John felt relief. Finally, the truth was clear. The HOA promised to work on better communication and fairness for all neighbors. That same day, the HOA called for a neighborhood meeting at the community hall. John decided to attend. He wanted to help make things better for everyone. At the meeting, many neighbors gathered. The room buzzed with quiet conversations. Some were still worried, but most were hopeful. The HOA chairperson stood up and spoke. We want to apologize for the trouble caused. Our goal is to build a peaceful community where everyone feels respected. Karen sat quietly in the back, looking serious but calm. John noticed she was listening carefully. After the chairperson spoke, John stood and shared his thoughts. I believe this neighborhood can be a place where we all feel safe and happy. It will take time, but if we listen and help each other, we can make it happen. Neighbors nodded, and a few clapped. John's words seemed to touch many hearts. After the meeting, John walked home with Lily and a few other neighbors. They talked about plans to organize neighborhood events, like cleanup days and block parties, to bring everyone closer. John smiled. This is the start of something good. Lily agreed. Yes, and I think Karen might join us too. John looked thoughtful. He hoped that was true. The next morning, John saw Karen outside her house, painting her front door a warm color. She looked peaceful. John waved, and Karen nodded in return. Days later, the neighborhood held its first block party in years. Families brought food, children played games, and neighbors laughed together. Karen even helped set up tables. It was a surprising but welcome sight. John talked to Karen for a moment. I'm glad to see you here. Karen smiled softly. Me too, John. Maybe we can work together after all. John felt a deep sense of hope. The fence that once caused so much trouble was now just part of a happy home. That evening, John sat on his porch, watching the stars. He thought about the journey he had been through, the fear, the anger, and finally, the peace. He whispered, sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the strongest friendships. John knew the neighborhood was not perfect yet, but it was on the right path. And with kindness, respect, and courage, they could build a better future together. The neighborhood was not the same as before. The fights and fear had slowly disappeared. John's courage, kindness, and honesty had helped change the hearts of many neighbors, including Karen. Weeks after the block party, the neighborhood was full of life again. Children played outside freely, neighbors chatted in their yards, and the streets were filled with laughter. The air felt lighter and happier. John sat on his porch one warm evening, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. He felt a deep sense of peace. His fence stood strong, a quiet symbol of his journey. Just then, Lily walked up the path with her 2 children, holding a basket of freshly baked cookies. "Good evening, John," she called cheerfully. John smiled. "Good evening, Lily. Those smell wonderful." Lily sat down beside him. "The neighborhood feels different now, doesn't it?" John nodded. "Yes, it does. We have come a long way." As they talked, Karen walked by with her dog. She stopped and smiled softly. "Good evening, John. I wanted to thank you for helping me see a better way." John stood and shook her hand warmly. "Thank you, Karen. It took courage for both of us." Karen looked around at the friendly faces and the peaceful street. "I realize now that control and fear only build walls between people. It's kindness and respect that bring us together." John smiled. "Exactly. We all want a happy neighborhood." The 3 of them stood for a moment, enjoying the quiet peace that had returned. In the weeks that followed, John helped organize community activities like gardening days and movie nights. Karen even volunteered to help with the neighborhood watch, using her energy for good instead of conflict. One afternoon, John received a phone call from the HOA board. They told him they were impressed with the change in the neighborhood and wanted to use their story as an example for other communities. John was proud but stayed humble. He knew this success was because of many people working together. That evening, John sat by the window and reflected. He thought about the challenges he had faced: fake officers, false accusations, and lonely fights. But he also thought about the strength found in kindness, honesty, and standing up for what is right. John whispered to himself, "Every problem has a solution if we face it with courage and heart." As the stars twinkled above, John felt ready for whatever came next. He had learned that peace is not just the absence of conflict but the presence of understanding. The neighborhood was no longer just a place to live. It was a community, a family. John smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of many good days to come.